Thank you.
Go ahead and talk, both of you.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Doug Holder, and I'm here on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, with my guest Alan Feldman.
And I'm very glad to be here and to meet you all.
That's great. And we're going to talk a bit about Alan's life and work as a poet, and his teaching and all that good stuff. And I'll read a brief introduction to Alan. Alan is Feldman. Wrote a Sail to a Great Island in 2004. He won the Pollak Prize.
Pollak, I think it is.
I would say Pollak, right?
Pollak.
For poetry from the University of Wisconsin. He wrote The Happy Genius in 1978. Won the annual George Elliston Book Award for the best collection published by a small U.S. nonprofit press. His work has appeared in Atlantic Monthly, The New Yorker, The Kenyon Review, among other magazines, including The Best American Poetry in 2001, edited by Robert Haas, and BAP 2001, edited by Kevin Young. Feldman's recent work has appeared in Hanging Loose, Cimarron Review, Upstreet, Southern Review, Yale Review, Salamander, Southwest Review, Cincinnati Review, Catamaran, Worcester Review, Boston Poetry Magazine, and Ibbotson Street recently,
That's
right?
right.
Ibbotson Street
That's right.
Magazine. His poem, A Man and a Woman, was featured in Tony Hoglin's 2013 article for Harper's, 20 Little Poems That Could Save America. Has it?
It's working on it.
Okay. Feldman was a professor and chair of English at Framingham State University, and for 22 years taught the advanced creative writing class at Harvard University's Radcliffe Seminars. He offers free drop-in poetry workshops at the Framingham Public Library near his home, and in the summer at the Wellfleet Library. Okay.
Yes, come one, come all. No experience necessary.
Okay. So Alan, I was just saying, we were both born in New York City in Far Rockaway. I was born in Manhattan in 1945. Me in 55. I grew up on the island. Then we moved to the island, Rockville Center. You moved to.
Well, I lived in Woodmere,
On the
until I left to go to college. Yes.
And I found that the atmosphere on Long Island rather stifling. And I mean, I know Whitman lived there and all that, but when I lived there, and I don't know when you lived there, but I found it just sort of, this sort of broad lawns and narrow minds of the suburbs.
I was desperate to get out of the suburbs, but I'll tell you something interesting about Woodmere. My mother and Louise Gluck's mother were best friends in high school, and she grew up in Hewlett, and I grew up in Woodmere. So apparently it was a fertile territory for poets. Louise gave an exhibition of her paintings at the Hewlett Library that I remember going to when I was in high school, and the paintings were very striking. And I met her then when I was at college at Columbia on a bus, and she said that she was taking a really good creative writing class with a poet named Leonie Adams. And Louise was very beautiful, and I thought if I sign up for that poetry workshop, maybe I'll actually get to meet her and to know her. And so I did, but I hated the workshop. It was all this focusing on punctuation and tiny little issues that I wasn't concerned about. So I stopped going, but I forgot to drop the course. So my transcript will show that the only course I ever took in poetry writing, I failed.
Oh, wow.
So
Did you ever talk to Louise since?
I don't, well, yes, but I don't think I ever told her that she was the cause of my failing my one and only poetry writing class.
But I mean, overall, do you? So you found some redeeming qualities. Do you ever revisit that in your work, your Woodmere?
Well, each person's, you take any community, each person's family is different. And my parents were teachers, and they took my sister and me to Europe for 3 months in 1952. And I remember vividly that when we were in Rome, my mother and father took us to see the Protestant cemetery in Rome where Keats and Shelley are buried. And it was an experience I never forgot. I was 7 years old, and here we were visiting the grave of somebody that we didn't know personally. And at the time, Shelley's grave was very well tended, covered with ivy. He came from a wealthy, aristocratic family. And Keats's grave was bare. So as a kid, I remember marking the difference. And then what I remember was that my mother started to cry at Keats's grave. And I thought, how could somebody who died so long ago have that much of an effect on a living person?
Your mother was an English teacher?
Yeah, she taught Latin, but she also taught English. And she loved the Romantic poets. And so I think that sort of planted in my soul this idea that there is a kind of transmission from the long gone dead to the living via poetry, which is a kind of living medium, and it may have been what made me determined to be an artist and even a poet. So it was Woodmere, but it was my particular house. So it wasn't totally stifling, but I did want to get into the city and into.
Now you live in Framingham, right? So
that's an irony of my life, yeah.
Now, tell me, you taught in the South Bronx in the late '60s. It must have been challenging, to say the least.
Yes, it was.
Tell me a bit about that.
Incredibly difficult. I was at. I had a choice. I could go to Vietnam or I could go to the South Bronx.
And so you went to both war
I think I chose wrong and went to the South Bronx. And I was in a special services school where the average sixth grader was reading at a third grade level. And 1/3 of the staff was brand new, like myself, and I had never been in a classroom before, as a teacher. And so I was terrible at it, and after the first half year, they mercifully took me out of my classroom, and they made me a specialist in language arts and science. So I got to teach the same lessons again and again all day long, and so I learned a little bit about how to teach. And then the second year, again, they were scratching their heads, what do we do with this guy, 22 years old? Doesn't know anything about teaching, and so they gave me class 5-1, and class 5-1, they were the kids who scored the highest on the math test out of 10 fifth grade classes. This was 5-1, and these were little geniuses, and amazingly, some of them were reading above grade level, and by the end of the year, some were reading way above grade level, and we put on plays, and I had them painting, and so I think I succeeded well enough with them. But this idea that you can take just any college-educated person and drop that person, like Teach for America at least tries to prepare people, but drop them into a classroom and think, oh well, because they're bright, they're going to be doing a great job. It's crazy. There's so much technique to classroom management to work with those kids.
There's also a lot of theater involved, I think.
Yeah, I was, I was ready to be theatrical, but I wasn't ready for kids where the main issue was how do you keep them in their seats,
Oh, yeah.
We had the gym equipment in the classroom, and I remember that after a few days of sort of testing me and seeing, who is this guy, what's he really about, they would grab the gym equipment and they'd be tossing all the volleyballs and everything around the room, and my job as a teacher became intercepting passes. And once I caught a chair in midair.
Wow.
And that silenced the room for at least 30 seconds. It was terrible.
Yeah,
so,
I taught in situations like that.
Did you? Yeah, I hope more successfully.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Your wife is Nanette Haas.
Yeah, Nan Haas Feldman.
Nan Haas.
Yes.
Is an artist, and I've interviewed many poets and writers like Bernard Horn, your colleagues.
Yeah, his wife. Yeah, Linda's an artist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you guys collaborate? Do you feed off each other in a way at all?
I'd put it this way: we understand each other's obsessiveness, which is important. If you really have been one way or another, I don't know what to say, infected by this need to make art of any kind, you have a kind of understanding for people, even if they're in other disciplines. And so Nan works all the time and has an incredible amount of drive. And I think I could credit myself with understanding that, and I think that she understands me, that, you know, if something you're working on gets hold of you, you're going to be immersed in it. And but as for working together, no, we're hilariously bad at working together. We did a book together of her beautiful color drawings and my poems for our 20th anniversary. It was called Anniversary. And we got into such a fight about how to bind the book. It nearly destroyed our marriage. So, so when we work together, this is how we do it. She does what she does, and then I'll pick out the drawings or the paintings that I think I would like to have with the text. And basically that's as far as our collaboration goes. Although we did once do a children's book together, and I think that that's been in the drawer for a long time, and we will soon publish that also. But there she actually was illustrating a story that I wrote.
It's important to illustrate.
Yeah, yeah, but she really doesn't illustrate.
Now, you gave me poems from your book, Partners, right? Is that correct?
Well, the book is called, modestly, Immortality.
Immortality.
Yeah, the epigraph is from Pasternak, Dr. Zhivago, where Dr. Zhivago's mother-in-law asks him if he believes in immortality, and he says, your life in others, that is your immortality. And so, so that's where I get my title from. And the book has 4 sections, and the second section, which I gave you, is called Partners, and it's essentially about partnering, about mostly love poems. A teacher of mine years and years ago said that one of the subjects that I was interested in was the psychology of love, and so there are a lot of poems about that.
In fact, one of your poems, the rowboat, the girl, the light, you wrote a girl you desired, and she swam when you were young.
I was 7, yeah.
You swam to your boat in a rustic lake. And then everything smelled of pine, and I think, I'm quoting, everything smelled of pine. That's how desire felt then, like
Right.
an odor, the pines that covered the hillside above my house. So desire, I guess, seemed more elemental, focused, timeless, as opposed to your desire now, where you write, which seems to be urgent and need to breathe it all in, and even deeper appreciation. Is that what I don't know?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think as you get older, and as I say to my wife, I'm going to be entering my 70th year. She says, no, you're only 69.
Also tough.
I think your desire becomes so generalized. You desire life, and I think when you're a child, you take that for granted, but you may have sometimes a really intense crush on a kid, another kid. And,
Mm-hmm. So we had discussed previous to the show about teaching. You wrote a book about teaching. You observed a teacher at Framingham State.
Right.
So if I asked you if I had it's very difficult to say. What makes a good teacher? I mean, if you had to give me a few Reader's Digest type thing, where you say what makes a good teacher?
Well, some of the ingredients obviously would be a really good knowledge of your subject or subjects, and a love for the subject. Start with that, and then a strong desire to be helpful. Like an inborn proclivity for giving traffic directions to strangers. In other words, you should be the kind of person who, if he sees a need, has that urge to reach out, to help. And I think if you combine those things, and then I think a sense of organization. observed so many classes that, and was amazed to see how shapeless the class can be, and how vague it is as to what's the essential purpose of this particular hour that we're going to spend together. So I would say those qualities.
Okay. And today you're going to read poems from different phases of your life.
Different
right?
decades.
Different
yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
So, and they love poems.
Yes.
You told me they were going to be love.
They are, and I thought it'd be interesting to survey how
Love changes.
love modulates. Yeah, yeah.
And we did touch on that.
We did.
We did touch on
Yeah.
that. But
So
you actually have about 15 minutes to read from your work.
Well, I'd be glad to. Sure.
Yeah, and
I'd be glad to.
that'd be
I'm
great.
going to start with, I guess, what you could call a pre-love poem. This was written after a bad date.
We'll have those.
And I came home, it was probably about 3 in the morning, and I had an epiphany. I realized why men and women were fated never to be able to get together. It's called A Man and a Woman. Between a man and a woman, the anger is greater, for each man would like to sleep in the arms of each woman, who would like to sleep in the arms of each man, if she trusted him not to be schizophrenic, if he trusted her not to be a hypochondriac, if she trusted him not to leave her too soon, if he trusted her not to hold him too long. And often, women stare at the word men as it lives in the word women, as if each woman carried a man inside her and a woe, and has crying fits that last for days, not like the crying of a man, which lasts a few seconds and rips the throat like a claw. But because the pain differs, much as the shape of the body, the woman takes the suffering of the man for selfishness, the man, the woman's pain for helplessness, the woman's lack of it for hardness, the man's tenderness for deception, which is really fear, the man's fear for fickleness. Yet cars come off the bridge in rivers of light, each holding a man and a woman. That was about 1970, and things started to look up for me shortly after that. I met Nan, we got married, we had a child. I'm skipping over a lot of love poems, obviously, but I'm going to go decade by decade. And here we are now with one child and another one on the way. And this is a little poem I don't remember writing, but I'm glad I have it. It's sort of like a fly caught in amber. Just one of those little frisons of feeling that you would never remember unless you wrote it down. And I learned to write this kind of poem, and I do this, I do that kind of poem that ends with a feeling, from Frank O'Hara. I wrote a book about Frank O'Hara. I loved his poetry. And he had these poems he'd write on his lunch hour called his I Do This, I Do That poem. So even though he was gay, I'm married with kids, he wrote about city life, I'm in the suburbs. Even so, the form of his poem, the kind of poem that he wrote, instructed me. So this is called The Quiet Years of Ordinary Objects. This pretty maternity blouse, for example, 1695 with pastel embroidered flowers around the neck, washable. I pass it while heading for Botolph's, where they sell expensive arty jewelry, but nothing I haven't already given you except a hand silk-screened card with a pastel rainbow and a pale yellow sun. Back at the stork shop, The salesgirl and I speculate on your probable size. Her first, she asks. No, second. She gives me the blouse in a bag. Later, at home, with you off to evening class, the afternoon sun in silver pajamas, our daughter bathed and singing herself to sleep. I find a gift box from Gilchrist in the closet, pack it with tissue paper, fold the blouse carefully with the rainbow card on top, and write something shamelessly corny, like, for my sunlight, my rainbow, happy birthday, and sign it Alan, though we're beyond names. So, because I wrote that, I remember the first time I felt so close to another person that it seemed weirdly formal to use my name. That's a poem you could write every day of your life. You know, think of a feeling you had, and then just write what led up to that feeling. Okay, so we'll move on into middle age. And this is a poem from a chapbook I did called The Personals. The last two poems I read was from The Happy Genius.
Is that still available?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. Yeah. The Personals. My wife reads them. She wants to keep abreast of what's available. Like a person who owns a house but still follows real estate. I imagine her back on the market because I've died, or I've slept through garbage day again, or one fatal time too often I've turned away in our bed, insisting on the right of a depressed, anxious person to freedom from happiness, the happiness she is always trying to give me. And how would she advertise? Humorous, carefree man needed for a life without inexplicable dissents? When she comes back exhilarated from evening class and tells me all the dirty jokes she's heard in carpool, like the one about, how do you know if elephants have been copulating in your backyard at night? And she turns to me in the dark and tells me she has the hots for me. And I just want to be alone in my bitterness. And she just wants to romp with someone in her liveliness. I think of the personals, and I surrender. Though I'll be damned if I'll talk to her. And I concentrate on stretching apart my toes and letting the pleasure sparks dart around between them. She doesn't seem to notice how furiously quiet I am. And anyway, I'm not furious. I'm a sour, sensitive, 35-year-old writer-teacher searching for an attractive, even-tempered woman interested in the arts. And as well-mated as I'll ever be, I drop off to sleep. In the morning, she rises to our son's first cries, and I rise to the groan of the garbage truck, and think about nothing I was so blackly thinking of last night except how you can know elephants have been copulating in the backyard, because you get up in the morning and find that some of the trash can liners are missing. I read that at the New England Modern Language Association, hundreds of serious scholars there. And I'd always wanted to, never written a poem that ends with the punchline of a joke. So I read it, I finished the poem, there was this deadly silence, and I thought, oh God, what did I do? And then about, I don't know, what seemed like minutes later, but probably wasn't, the whole room detonated. They got the joke. And it was such a powerful feeling. I had a tiny little insight into how comedians might feel. Timing, yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay, I'll read two more. So here's one from older middle age, or I guess you'd say older middle age. This is a sonnet. I sometimes get into periods when I write these rhyme sonnets, though I do my best to conceal most of the rhymes by enjamming the lines. This was this was written during a trip that we took with my daughter and her new husband. It was a time of great happiness. We were driving with them through Provence, and so I love this poem partly just because it brings that moment back to me. I think they've been married 11 years now, about. Brian gets a week off from his job so he can come to France, and with my free time, I figure out how Becky and he can see the whole region and still make Paris. Dance poplars and pointy dark cypresses and show all your beauty to my beloved young. I time each walk I take at the rate they'd walk it, she so gifted at lingering and her husband so patient with her as she takes part of a day to admire a lizard rather than a town. The grand valleys can't match her hair in his eyes, and a day spent lying near each other at the pool, or the simplest raspberry cool she shares with him, vies with the Sound of Music meadow, or the jewel of all towns, Roche-Baudin, with buildings so old they're wavy, set against hills that recede to silver, fold after fold.
Painterly.
Yeah, and the book which we did, Round Trip, has beautiful paintings by Nan of towns in Provence, and this town is Roche-Baudin, the jewel of all towns. It's full of arches because there's a natural arch cut through the mountain going into the town. And I'll close with this poem. I think that if you've been lucky enough to be married a long, long time, you develop a modus vivendi, a way of living with each other and working with each other and cooperating with each other, but also giving each other space. So this is a little poem called Love Poem. It's about folding a sail, a big sail. The sail is so vast when it's laid out on the driveway. I stake it with a screwdriver through the shackle at the tack